Yo, what's going on, Stadium? Red corner, blue corner, killing it as always. But now it's time to talk about a real football conference, Mike. One that we actually watch week in and week out, not just the weekend that two of the big three finally square off with one another. Of course, we could only be talking about the SEC. I am T-Bob Hebert, former LSU Tiger. He is SEC Mike, the host of the highest rated SEC podcast, all your podcast platforms. And we got a great show for you planned today. Mike, what's going on, man? How are we feeling today?
Oh man, the weather it feels like fall football, feels like upsets going to be happening this weekend in the SEC. I couldn't be happier, T-Bob.
Yeah, to give you an idea of how SEC I am, it got to 50 degrees and I immediately busted out my heaviest winter coat. Didn't even matter that later in the day it gets all the way up to 75. I'll be damned if you're going to stop me from getting these North Face fits off at 7:30 in the morning, okay? We got to get it where we can down here. Speaking of, I loved back in my day to get it in the trenches. And, well, the Joe Moore Award is the award handed out to the best offensive line in the entire country. And 6 SEC teams found their way into kind of the semifinal, if you will. However, I think it's a bunch of pretenders, right? Florida, no. Georgia, lazy. That's actually been one of their biggest weaknesses this year. Mizzou's nice, but they're not great. Kentucky had the one game against Florida. Outside of that, the Big Blue Wall's nowhere to be found. To me, the only ones that stand tall upon further scrutiny are LSU and Tennessee. And look, we all know what LSU's offense has done this year. They ranked top 10 in the country in 7 different categories. Number 2 in total offensive first downs. Number 2 in the country in third down conversion. Number 3 in scoring. 4 in like the list goes on and on. One of only 2 teams to be top 10 in both rushing and passing. But if there is a legitimate challenger in the SEC, it is your Tennessee Volunteers, Mike. This is a Tennessee team that doesn't throw well. They're not explosive, but they run the hell out of the ball and they stop opponents from creating havoc. 2 things that are going to be critical going into Tuscaloosa this weekend.
Yeah, no question, T-Bob. And the one game that they didn't have their full allotment was the Florida game. And hey, I'm a Tennessee grad, so I got to make excuses for this dreadful streak against Florida. But the center, Cooper Mays, was out. Gerald Mincey, the right tackle, was out, and there was a notable difference. So, again, I didn't think that they would run wild on A&M, which had the number 1 rush defense in the SEC last weekend. They went for 232 yards on them Aggies. That was critical to getting the win. And it could be this weekend in Tuscaloosa. The one team, T-Bob, you didn't mention there that everybody hyped up was Alabama and this offensive line. They wanted to go back to murder ball, they called it. Well, murder ball is allowed 31 sacks this season, T-Bob. That's 130th out of 133 teams in the country. This is a big edge in this football game for Tennessee, the defensive line versus Alabama's offensive line, and it could be the deciding factor.
Yeah, that's something I want to get into here in a bit, right? Because that is the main statistical difference between that. Like, that's the main edge that it looks like Tennessee has on paper here. Royal Payne says in the YouTube chat, youtube.com/watch stadium, I was trying to figure out how to justify a fire in the fireplace this weekend, but it's going to be 82. Yeah, hell yeah, Payne. You're obviously from the South as well. Welcome. Yeah, look, what I love about this is, and to your point, Alabama didn't even make this finalist list, right? But what I love is I think LSU and Tennessee are the best, and I think they're both going to have the chance to go into Tuscaloosa and prove it against what is the SEC's best front 7, led by Dallas Turner, who currently leads the SEC with 7 sacks. He's 3rd in TFLs with 9.5. Now, to be fair to our Vols, James Pierce Jr. is right behind him in both categories, an excellent rusher in his own right. But, Mike, when it comes to stopping Dallas Turner individually, who is going to be responsible for that job? Which matchup should fans be watching come Saturday?
Yeah, that would be left tackle John Campbell, the Miami transfer, who he made waves nationally. If you missed it in the opener against Virginia, he basically took a guy into the locker room right before halftime, blocked him about 30 yards out of bounds. But I guess that's legal nowadays. But John Campbell, Hey, it is what it is in the NIL era. It's free agency. Tennessee went in heavy because they needed a tackle to replace Darnell Wright. John Campbell versus Dallas Turner. That's going to be a critical matchup this weekend at Tuscaloosa.
This is an interesting spot for Tennessee here going into Tuscaloosa because at first I kind of hated it for Tennessee, right? Like I'm very impressed how they handled A&M, but that was in Neyland. Now you're going again to T-Town. You're playing against an Alabama team that has confidence. You're playing against an Alabama team that has revenge on the mind. And you're now a Tennessee Volunteer team that is going to try to beat Alabama at their own game, going to try to out-physical them, run the ball, right? This isn't like last year where you had the very explosive and dynamic offense to take advantage. But it boils down to this, okay? Both teams are great, second and third in the SEC, at creating havoc, right? Your sacks and your tackles for loss. Like you mentioned earlier, Alabama is awful at preventing havoc. They're dead last, giving up 31 sacks. They're second to last, having allowed 50 TFLs. Tennessee's great. Great. They've only given up 9 sacks, only 23 TFLs, lead the SEC in both categories. So it looks like the Volunteers actually have a significant advantage in the trenches, like Texas did. When they went into Alabama, they came out with a 10-point win. The difference is Texas was explosive. And so here's what it boils down to, Mike, and this is what I will ask you. Can Tennessee's slight edge on the line, maybe more than slight, can their edge on the lines make up for the edge that Alabama has in explosivity? Because if there's one thing that Jalen Milroe does, it's just hit home runs. He's like a classic modern MLB player where it's either strikeout or home run with him.
Right. And I think that's a big question. That is the question, because we've not seen it from not only from Joe Milton, but anytime he does hit one of these guys in stride, which is rare, they seem to drop the ball this year. So it's a failure by all accounts. And I would force Joe Milton to dink and dunk all the way down the field because he's not accurate. He's making critical mistakes. But one thing to monitor here, T-Bob, there was rumors that Jalen Milroe was injured about 2 weeks ago, and he's played, but he's not run the ball, which maybe that, and the injury rumor was hamstring. So maybe he's a little bit banged up, and maybe that limits outside of the shot put plays. That's a critical part of his game as well, running the football. And if he can't do that, I think that certainly favors Tennessee as well.
So here's something else that stands out in my mind when it comes to this game. You said you had a fun fact for me. Well, shout out to my guy Colin Wilson of the Action Network, Big Bets on Campus podcast. I love talking to him. He's a big analytical guy. And he gave me a stat that kind of blew my mind, right? You look at Jalen Milroe this year, and people think he's been all right. He's actually turned in quite a good passer rating considering the volume and everything he's been asked to do. But Jalen Milroe is actually carrying a 125 NFL passer rating, not that college efficiency rating that gets up into the 200s. He's carrying an NFL passer rating of 125 when pressured this season. And so when I look at that, and I think about the fact that, look, Alabama's going to get those explosives. Maybe that edge for Tennessee on the line start to not matter as much. I don't know where I fall in a gambling context necessarily, beyond that I love the under in this game, Mike. But unfortunately, from where I sit, after deep rumination, I do think that Alabama actually emerges with the win here.
Yeah, which Jalen Milroe shows up. I mean, he proved a lot against A&M, and that probably goes to Colin's stats there. I mean, he was getting harassed the entire game, yet if he wasn't getting sacked, he was making strikes to Jermaine Burton. If he can continue that, I agree with you 100%. I don't think there's any doubt Alabama wins this game, but last week against Arkansas, that was not there. I believe he finished the game 3 for 11 passing. So which Jalen Milroe shows up is going to be huge in this ball game.
Baseball Man 1019, T-Bob Mike, 2 pros, SEC legends. Thank you, Baseball Man. I'm Football Man. Nolan Hawley, got to hit that Tennessee money line. Look, my heart is always against Alabama, okay? I want the Crimson Emperor to lose, but he does cast a very long shadow, especially in T-Town. All right, coming up next, look, we all know that Georgia still reigns supreme atop the SEC, yada, yada, yada. They don't play every game's at home, but what's some of the rest of the conference? Who is the best? of the rest. You got a grouping of one-loss teams that are right there. And Billy Napier, old Sunbelt Billy. Is he catching too much heat in Gainesville? We'll tackle it next on Rise.